Was the Empress Cixi a tyrant or a visionary? History remembers Empress Cixi as the Dragon Lady, a ruler shrouded in mystery, controversy, and legend. Some call her ruthless, but others recognize her as the woman who modernized China and kept an empire from falling apart. For nearly half a century, she ruled from behind a screen, balancing power struggles, foreign invasions, and internal rebellions. But her rule was never easy. She was underestimated as a woman, forced to navigate a court full of scheming officials, and her son and adopted son were disappointments. But how did she rise from a lowly concubine to become the most powerful woman in China? And what was her true legacy? Let's first look at her early life and rise to power. Born in 1835 to an unimportant but noble Manchu family, Cixi grew up in a world where women were not meant to lead. Unlike boys of elite families, she was not given a classical education, but she refused to remain ignorant. Unlike most girls, she learned to read and write, and she then took every opportunity to develop the skills that would later shape the fate of an empire. At 16, she was chosen to enter the Forbidden City as a concubine of the young Emperor Xianfeng. She had no influential family, no status, but she had intelligence and ambition. In 1856, she gave birth to the emperor's only surviving son, an event that would change her destiny forever. She became fast friends with the emperor's official Empress Cixi, who had no children of her own. But China was now in crisis. The Opium Wars had left the country humiliated. China was forced into signing unequal treaties that handed over trade rights to Britain and France. Also, the devastating Taiping Rebellion was sweeping across the empire. Rebels were threatening to overthrow the Qing Dynasty. Meanwhile, the imperial court, instead of addressing these crises, was drowning in corruption. As China burned, Emperor Xianfeng's health declined. In 1860, when foreign troops marched into Beijing and burned the Summer Palace, he fled the city, along with his court. A year later, Xianfeng died, leaving his 5-year-old son, Emperor Tongji, as the heir. A child emperor would need a regent and be easy to control. So a powerful faction of conservative officials, led by Su Shun, took control of the government, sidelining both Cixi and Empress Qian. But Cixi was no ordinary palace woman. She saw an opportunity and formed a secret alliance with Empress Qian, convincing her that Su Shun was dangerous. The two women, though powerless in title, staged a daring coup. With the help of influential Han and Manchu officials, they arrested Su Shun and his allies. Within days, Su Shun was executed, and overnight, Cixi and Xian became the joint rulers of China. Officially, they were co-regents on behalf of the young emperor. But behind the scenes, Cixi was the one making decisions. Empress Cixi knew that to save the Qing dynasty, she needed the most talented men in the military and administration. She appointed Li Hongzhang, a Han Chinese, and a brilliant leader and military strategist to suppress the Taiping Rebellion, a civil war that had already killed 20 million people. She even hired foreign experts, including British General Charles Gordon, to train China's forces. With these initial reforms, China began to modernize. Railways, shipyards, and telegraph lines appeared. Young scholars were sent abroad to study Western sciences. The first modern universities and colleges were created. Empress Cixi wanted to modernize China to boost its economy. This was in order to avoid total submission to the West, as well as Japan, which had become a threat to China, seeking to take over Chinese territory. But Cixi faced another challenge, her own son. Emperor Tongji, spoiled and reckless, had no interest in governing. He ignored state affairs and indulged in pleasure. His reign was a disaster, and in 1875, at just 18, he died suddenly, officially of smallpox, though some rumors claim syphilis. With no heir, Cixi broke with tradition and selected her 3-year-old nephew, Guangxu, son of her sister and Prince Chun, to rule. Once again, she remained in power as regent. As Guangxu grew older, he wanted not just change, but radical change. By 1898, Guangxu launched the 100 Days Reform. This was an ambitious but poorly executed attempt to restructure the government, education, and military in a great wave of reform. But Guangxu had underestimated the opposition. His enemies in court and beyond turned against him, and drastic change. Guangxu had fallen under the influence of a radical academic and Western-influenced revolutionary Kang Yuwei. Kang plotted against Cixi, and many believe he intended to harm the empress. Within weeks, however, Cixi ended her retirement and intervened, placing the emperor under house arrest for the rest of his life. Some saw this as an act of tyranny, but to Cixi, she had saved China from chaos. The empire was not ready for such drastic reforms. And yet, ironically, she herself was gradually introducing changes that would shape China's future. At the dawn of the 20th century, China faced a new crisis, the Boxer Rebellion. An anti-foreign uprising swept across the country, targeting Westerners and Chinese Christians. At first, Cixi hesitated, but when the Boxers grew violent, she saw them as a potential tool to push out foreign influence. She made a fateful decision to support the Boxer Rebellion. This was a terrible mistake. In 1900, an international coalition of foreign armies invaded Beijing, crushing the Boxers and occupying the city. Forced to flee, Cixi escaped the capital in disguise, traveling through the countryside to exile in Xi'an. For the first time in decades, Cixi was free to leave the palace walls, and she explored China with interest, encountering people from all walks of life. In exile, she negotiated peace, and just a year later she returned to Beijing in triumph. For the first time, she welcomed foreign diplomats, and even invited Western women to have tea with her in the Forbidden City, signaling a new era of diplomacy. By the early 1900s, Cixi recognized that China needed deeper reforms. Cixi announced a series of reforms that shook up all aspects of Chinese life. Foot binding, a custom long practiced on Han girls, was banned. Yet Cixi recognized that it would take time to change this practice. Freedom of the press was expanded. She was even making plans to transition the empire into a modern constitutional monarchy, similar to Britain's. But it was too late. In November 1908, Cixi fell seriously ill and died on November 15th. Just one day before her death, Emperor Guangxu, aged 37, mysteriously died. Many suspect he was poisoned to prevent him from undoing her legacy. Without the guiding hand of Empress Cixi, the Qing Dynasty collapsed 3 years later, ending thousands of years of imperial rule. History often paints Empress Cixi as a ruthless ruler who resisted change. But in reality, she was one of China's most strategic and forward-thinking leaders, in spite of the prejudice and social constraints she faced as a woman. She was no saint. She made mistakes, played palace politics, and lived in luxury. But she also held China together, modernized its institutions, and fought against centuries of tradition. So, was she a villain or a visionary? The answer, as always, is more complicated than history suggests. What do you think? Was she a tyrant, or was she the architect of modern China? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out other videos.